welcome back to the Stormwater Creek podcast. We're here with a very special guest over the phone, Scott Hade from the Sportsman's Alliance for Alaska, as well as Businesses for Bristol Bay. And anyone who's too in tune to the world of conservation is going to know this conversation is going to center pretty heavily around Pebble Mine. So, Scott, thanks for joining us, man.
Thanks for having me, Abe.
So Scott and I met first and foremost at the Texas Fly Fishing Festival, which I think is an awesome event, and kind of sat and talked to each other. Obviously, I'm in the Stormwater Creek Cruise, pretty involved in backcountry hunters and anglers, which is obviously aligns pretty closely with Scott's organization and their opposition to the Pebble Mine, and so it was just a natural fit for us to begin our conversation and kind of we see very eye to eye on a lot of things. So.
Yeah, that was a fun event. It was my first time at Texas Fly Fishing. Don't forget the Texas Fly Fishing and Brewfest.
And Brewfest.
There was that component as well. So you can't slight that. That was pretty fun. But anyway, no, it was my first time there at that event in Plano, and it was really great. I mean, there were a number of like-minded folks in the room who care about things like fisheries conservation, and certainly Bristol and the Pebble. A pretty big one in the world of fisheries conservation, and it was pretty cool. There were all at least three, I can just think off the top of my head, operators who have either houses or lodges located in Bristol Bay, who were at that show as well, including a few who actually their off-season home is in Texas. So pretty cool connection.
It's got to be quite a swing to go from Bristol Bay to, which is in southeast Alaska for everybody, right? Am I right in saying that?
South Alaska, southwest of Anchorage.
Okay.
Yeah, it's on the side of, you'd have to go from Anchorage in the Kenai Peninsula and head west across Cook Inlet, and then you cross a couple mountains and small hills and big Lake Iliamna, get out to known as Bristol Bay. Kind of if you picture Alaska and you see the Alaska Peninsula, which eventually turns into an island chain that juts way out there into the. If you look at the stuff that's north of the Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutian chain, that's roughly the Bristol Bay, the water part of Bristol Bay. The Bristol Bay region, of course, encompasses all that land in Southwest Alaska.
Quite an area there. So how did you?
Yeah,
how did you even get started with this? I mean, what led you down this road?
Yeah, it's an interesting backstory, and I'll try to give you a condensed version of it. I grew up in the Midwest. As a kid, my mom and dad took my brother and I fishing and hunting all the time from when we were little kids, and traveled all over the lower 48. Never made it to Alaska when we were kids, but my parents instilled a love of the outdoors in both myself and my brother. And I ended up going to college and got my degree in economics and accounting, and finished college and went into the real world and got a job working for a finance company, lending money to businesses, and did that for about 10 years. And through a circumstance that a lot of people would consider a pretty trying episode in one's life and career. The company I was working for, twice in the span of 12 months, was sold to another company, and each time there was a question over whether our small office was going to survive, or if we would get merged into some other part of the company. And truthfully, I had coworkers who were losing sleep over it. And here I am. I don't know. I was like 31, 32 years old at the time, and truthfully had been thinking, is this something that I really want to do, for the rest of my working days? I mean, life's too short, and you spend too much of it working to begin with. I think most people would probably admit. And if you can find something that you can get up in the morning and say, I really truthfully care and have a passion for what I'm going to go and do at work today, I think that puts you sadly in a small minority of people in the world these days. So I was one of those. why did I desk job? Oh, it's because that's what I went to school for. It's because that's what I did last week, last month, last year. I was good at it. It paid well. I liked the people that I work with. But in the end, did I really, feel like I was making a difference in a real sense in the world? And I had thoughts for a few years about, maybe I want to do something different, and something, maybe to do with the outdoors. I didn't know exactly what, but when this episode happened, where the company was purchased twice in the span of 12 months, I ended up with an opportunity at the age of 32 to decide, geez, here's my chance. I mean, what do I want to do? Maybe not with the rest of my life, but with the next part of my life.
Yeah.
And the offers were keep job function A and relocate to city 1, or take job function B and relocate to city 2. At the time, I was living in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Loved it there, pheasant hunting, fishing, all sorts of cool stuff. And the moves would have meant moving back to my home state of Minnesota, which I loved and still do. But I thought, what's behind door number 3? And door number 3 turned out to be a 10-month severance package. And again, I looked at this and I thought, I'm 32 years old. When am I going to get a chance like this again? Probably no time real soon. So you're telling me I'm going to get paid for 10 months to kind of figure out what I want to do next? And a lot of my coworkers were like, boy, you should get another job right away and earn double money for 10 months. And I was just not in that place. I was just like, you kidding me? That's so far down the list.
Are you kidding me?
That's so far down the list. It's not even being considered. In fact, until you said it to me just now, I hadn't even thought of that.
Yeah.
So no, that's not going to be what I'm going to do. So that summer, having been to Alaska a few times in the past on fairly short visits, that summer I booked a couple of trips that allowed me to spend, I think it was about 6 weeks combined in Alaska. I did a big backpacking and rafting trip up above the Arctic Circle for almost 3 weeks, and I did some cool things. Went fishing in Prince William Sound, and was on a boat where a couple guys steamed and caught 8-foot-long, 400-pound salmon shark, which is kind of a unique kind of shark.
Wow.
Located in the North Pacific. So that was fairly thrilling. And then I had three cousins who got married that summer, and truthfully, I missed 2 of the 3 weddings. I only made it to one of them, but they understood because they figured I was up in Alaska having a good time, which was the truth. And I came home, hit one of those weddings, and then I went on a couple-week trip where we went up and did a bunch of camping, did a bunch of hiking. Went and saw Denali National Park, camped real close to one of the closest spots you can camp to Mount McKinley, now officially referred to as Denali, the highest peak in North America, and did some freshwater fishing in rivers for salmon, did some saltwater fishing for halibut. Just had a great time. The one and only time my little brother's been to Alaska. He came along with me. So at the end of that summer, I actually was back home in South Dakota and had a message on my answering machine. Somebody who I had met along the way asked me if I knew anyone who would be interested in, just kind of being a spokesperson for Wild Alaska and going around and with people about some public lands issues in Alaska. And I picked up the phone and I called him back and I said, yeah, I happen to know somebody. You're talking to him right now. I'm kind of interested. Tell me more. That was, I guess, September of 2001 was my first day where I went to work on a short contract for just a couple months to go around South Dakota and North Dakota and visit with people from all walks of life, all sorts of groups, like garden clubs, birding clubs, church groups, hunting and fishing groups, you name it, and talk to them about a couple places in Alaska, federal lands that had some management challenges, and members of Congress from the Dakotas at the time had some fairly important leadership roles. So I was lucky enough to live in a part of the country where, we had a whole lot of people that live in the Dakotas, but we had some people in the Senate in particular who were quite important. So, I kind of had this thing dropped right in my lap, and I thought, I'm still getting paid for my old job. So what's the harm in, giving this a try? And boy, I tell you what, it was pretty quick, in my tenure that I kind of thought, this is pretty amazing. I mean, I get to go talk to people about Alaska. I mean, anybody who loves the outdoors, whether it's fishing, hunting, hiking, camping, anything like that. I mean, you have this, spot in your heart for Alaska, whether it's just a dream, and dreams are super important to me and super motivational. I always describe it in my job. I get to meet people all across the country, and 90% of the people I meet fall into one of two categories. Either you've been to Alaska before and you can't wait to go back, or you haven't been there yet, but you dream of going someday. There's still 10% of the people who think it's just cold, miserable, and,
Yeah.
Sometimes a year it is, and sometimes it even is kind of miserable in the summer. But
Mosquitoes
there's times when interior Alaska's in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, I fall into that kind of second group of people who have not been, but it's just it is an absolute dream of mine to be able to go to that place. It is. I just feel like it's one of the very last places, at least in this country, that we have that is as remote and wild as you're going to get ever.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, Alaska is just a very aspirational place.
Yeah.
And it kind of holds a mystique, I would say, in the hearts and minds of people who like the outdoors. And there's a lot of great places in the lower 48.
Sure.
There's a lot of big wild places, particularly in the American West. But I tell you what, once you go to Alaska, you will realize that Alaska just dwarfs everything.
Yeah.
I mean, the scale of what you find in Alaska is unlike anything you have ever experienced. Now, I'm gonna, I'm not doing this to offend. I'm doing this to joke a little bit.
Sure.
I've done a lot of traveling over the years at various events, and I make it to Texas at least once each year, probably. Sometimes I make it a couple times for different things. And people see a map of Alaska, and they really don't realize how big it is. If you overlaid a map of the state of Alaska onto the lower 48, I mean, it would stretch from the Aleutian Islands, would be touching the California coast, and the southeast part of Alaska, the inside passage where the cruise ships and stuff go, that would be down touching Florida, and then the north of Alaska would be pretty much touching the Canada border. So it is enormous.
Yeah.
And especially in Texas, I like to crack the joke and tell them that, what, if they cut Alaska in half, Texas would be the third biggest. Alaska A would be 1, Alaska B would be 2, and then Texas.
Yeah, no,
that's how big it is.
And I'll say that it's not too often you get to go to a place that is bigger than where you're from. As a Texan, right? I mean,
right. Yeah, exactly.
Most of the time, people are like, "Oh, it took me 4 hours to get across the state, or 5 hours." I'm like, "Ugh, 5 hours? I can't even, let alone something like Alaska, where there's, you can't even get to a lot of places unless you're on foot or on a float plane, or,
Yep.
I mean.
Yep. The road system is a limiting factor. That is for sure. But there's some amazing stuff that you can
I think it's a benefit,
from the road system.
I like the fact that there's not a lot of roads there. As somebody who's never been there, who's never set foot, I like the fact that there's untamed stretches of land that just are not untouchable, but
right.
Very difficult to get into for sure,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you need to access them by plane or boat, and that said, when I do, so we kind of touched on how I got into doing what I do, and basically a lot of my work over the years has been traveling the country and visiting with people at various sport shows, like you and I met at the thing in Plano. I've done that dozens and dozens and dozens of times across the country over the years. But just visiting with people about, their dream of going to Alaska, people, that it's going to cost an arm and a leg and their firstborn child to go and do an Alaska, vacation. And sure, you can do it that way if you want to or need to. There's certainly those opportunities and options available to you. But you know what I tell people? Heck, get yourself there, and you can find pretty reasonable airfare into Anchorage in the summertime, and you rent yourself a pickup truck with a camp on the back, like a camper topper on the back of a pickup.
Sure.
Because there's a lot of cool stuff you can get to on the road system, including enormous national parks and reserves in Alaska, bigger than anything you're probably going to encounter, in the lower 48. And you can drive to those places. Your vehicle, you're going to need transportation to get around. Check. You're going to need lodging. Well, that topper on the back, there's your lodging. You're going to need, you're going to need to eat. And sure, you can stop and eat some meals out at restaurants, but having that camper topper, you get a traveling kitchen. You can knock for a pretty reasonable amount compared to what a lot of people think it costs to go to Alaska. So
sure.
I always let people know that, don't be intimidated by thinking that Alaska is out of the realm of possibility for you for financial reasons. You can do it and not break the bank.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of decent fishing and hiking and other things that are available, fairly close to and even on the road system.
Yeah, I mean, I think with a little ingenuity, you can kind of do whatever you wanted. Like I said, to fly up there and get yourself a cooler and with the fishing pole and have some fun. Yeah,
I mean, it would be entirely easy to get yourself a plane ticket, go up there, and kind of just wing it for a couple of weeks. You would barely scratch the surface.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know, man. It's definitely on my list of places to go to, and my wife keeps talking to me about a cruise, and I'm like, well, if we go on a cruise, because I'm not a big fan of cruises. I'm maybe in the minority there, but I've never been on one. I hear they're great, but I don't know. I locked on a boat that I can't fish on. I'm not.
Yeah. The cruises, they stop in ports in
Sure.
Southeast Alaska. They'll offer you some daytime excursions, but you're going to be really crammed for time to
Very
try
limited,
and
yeah.
fish it, try to get some fishing in on one of those stops. An alternative that I would mention to you and to your listeners, I would invite people to investigate something called the Alaska Marine Highway System.
Okay.
It is a state-run ferry boat system, and it starts as far south as Bellingham, Washington, north of Seattle, and then it runs along the coast of British Columbia, and then you hit Southeast Alaska. The first city you get to is Ketchikan, and then it goes the same places that the big fancy cruise ships go. You can do it for a fraction of the price. It also can make it into some pretty cool areas that the big cruise ships can't simply get into. The boats, instead of thousands and thousands of people on them, have, a few hundred people on them. You can put a vehicle on there if you want to. Obviously, it costs to bring the vehicle on the thing.
Sure.
But some of them, I think all of them probably offer like a cabin. You can stay in, you've got a bed in there. They've got a restaurant board. Nothing fancy like the sit down things on the big cruise ships, but it's a way to see Southeast Alaska, which is an incredible part of the state. The Tongass National Forest is the biggest national forest in the U.S. Forest Service system, about 17 million acres, and that's a way to see Southeast Alaska again on a budget way of doing it. I've done it the first time I went to that part of Alaska. I hopped on in Bellingham and rode it north, and it's pretty darn cool. I didn't get a cabin since I was traveling solo. I just slept on a deck chair with my sleeping bag up on the covered deck area on the top floor. People pitched tents on it. My mom and dad took it on. Brother and I organized for them, but they had a cabin and
Sure.
stuff like that. So it's a cool alternative. And again, that's the Alaska Marine Highway System.
Alaska Marine Highway System. I mean, that is definitely something I'll have to check out because That seems really neat. Not only do you get to see
Yeah.
kind of as a Texan, as you get to see part of Washington, you get to see British Columbia, and then to
hmm
see you know any part of Alaska would be awesome. So
Yep.
um,
And that part's worse than the rest. I mean, the rest are big, wide open spaces usually, huge mountain ranges, rolling tundra, big valleys and things like that. Southeast Alaska is way different. I mean, it's like what you picture the rainforest in British Columbia stretches all the way up to that whole panhandle of Alaska. I mean, it's like the biggest of the remaining temperate rainforest left in the world. And it's cool season rainforest. So
wow.
it's pretty spectacular. I mean, like I said, Alaska's got a load of options, and they're pretty unique in many regards. And Southeast is kind of like a world unto itself.
Yeah, it's like I said, I've got to check it out, and I appreciate those suggestions. I think everybody should definitely check those out. So from a standpoint of what we're talking about tonight, mainly, which is the Pebble Mine. Let's start
Yep.
with kind of what is Bristol Bay, which is where this is centered, where this mine this company is trying to put a mine, is Bristol Bay.
hmm
So tell me a little bit about Bristol Bay. What's so what's so special about it? What's so great about it?
All right. So as I mentioned earlier, Bristol is a region in southwest Alaska, located roughly 200 miles southwest of Anchorage. If you're on the Kenai Peninsula, you look west and you see the far side of Cook Inlet, the volcanoes over there. So you keep going further, jump across that, and then you southwest Alaska. It's known for a few things. Primarily, I would say it's most famous for being home to the largest and most productive runs of wild salmon left on planet Earth. The sockeye runs, in particular in Bristol Bay, are staggering in number. I mean, last year, the return in Bristol Bay for 2018 season was upwards of 62 million sockeye salmon returned to the
Holy
rivers of
crap!
Bristol Bay. And if you know how salmon work, I mean, they're a fish who are born in fresh water. They a couple of years, actually a year in fresh water, migrate out to the ocean where they spend, depending on the species, year, 2, 3, 4 years out in the ocean. Then they return to the very rivers of their birth. It's a miracle, and scientists actually don't know exactly how they find their way back. But that's how salmon works. So you've got this enormous area out in southwest Alaska called Bristol Bay that has this incredibly huge salmon fishery. And like I said, last year was an all-time record since it began keeping track of numbers in the late 1800s. So it's a huge fishery, and it's also a place that fishery has supported the native population of the region for eons. I mean, since time, since people lived in Bristol Bay, they have depended upon that salmon resource. For living out there, it's kind of like the outdoors is your grocery store. You get your protein from the water and the land, and the folks who have lived there for centuries, generation upon generation, have relied upon this enormous salmon resource. And then it's also regarded as one of the finest places in the world to go on a remote wilderness fishing or hunting trip. And Bristol Bay is widely regarded as one of the finest places in the world to go and chase after what is known for on the sport fishing side is enormous rainbow trout. And you can be out there fishing and hook and land a rainbow trout that you are like ready to pass out because you are so excited how big this trout is. So, it's all catch and release out there. You've got to get out the measuring tape, and you're like, whoa, sweet, 29 inches. And your guide will absolutely break your heart because he's going to tell you, you know what, that's a really nice fish. But to be considered a trophy out here, you got to touch 30 on the tape measure.
Oh, wow.
Oh man, you know they catch them. You know, every week the lodges out there are landing 30-inch fish.
Wow.
It's a place like that. I mean, it's a place that anglers dream to go. You know, the big rainbows are a huge draw, but there's all 5 species of Pacific salmon return to Bristol Bay throughout the year. Um, there you got king salmon, silver salmon, cohos come in the fall. You got sockeyes, and you got chum salmon and pink salmon. So all 5 species of salmon return to Bristol Bay, and you know they're all fun to catch. Some are better eaters than others. You know, kings and sockeye are regarded as probably the better eaters. My favorite to catch are actually coho silver salmon. I think they fight a lot feistier. King salmon are large, but it's largely a battle of attrition. I think I would describe that as. I remember one of the first times that my wife was able to join me on a trip out there. We did a fly out and went down to a relatively small little river down the Alaska Peninsula. And, you know, we flew over some amazingly beautiful country. And you're looking down, you're seeing lakes and rivers, and wetlands, and, you know, bears and moose and just all sorts of stuff. We get to this small little river and hop in a boat and start fishing. And I remember at the end of the day, her reaction was, you know, when you're gone on the road, because in the early days when I was going around the country talking to people about Bristol Bay and the Pebble mine, which we'll get to here in a bit, you know, I was out there kind of like playing Johnny Appleseed and letting people know what this place is about and what the threat is to it. And I was gone a lot. Like the winter months are the months when those sport shows happen all around the country because, you know, what are you doing? You're not outside, you know, doing your fishing and hunting. You're
Exactly.
like shows, dreaming about fishing and hunting.
Figuring out what you're going to do next year, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I would be, you know, having my booth at that, you know, at these shows across the country. Pretty much 3 weeks out of every 4 weeks, I was gone. And at the end of that day of fishing, my wife looks at me and she's like, you know, when you're gone all that time, it really does kind of stink because I would be gone and I would come home for a few days in between shows and, you know, swap out dirty clothes for clean clothes and hit the road again. She said, you know, it really does stink. It's not easy. She said, but now that I've been here and seen what this place is, she's like, I understand. I get it. So at that, on that day, she ended up landing, I think it was 4 king salmon for her and I had 3. So I'm, you know, fine admitting that she caught more fish than I did that day.
Sometimes that's what you want, right?
Yeah. And I'm also fine admitting and happy that she caught the largest fish of the day. She caught a king salmon that for a long time, there was a photo that I had as a screensaver on my laptop, was our fishing guide, guy from, ironically, my home state of Minnesota, guiding up in Alaska for many seasons. So he's holding this king salmon that, you know, I guess is probably about 35 pounds. And my wife, Nikki, is standing next to him, you know, just this huge smile on her face.
Yeah.
And every fish that she caught that day of those 4 was larger than any fish that she had ever caught on any day before in her life. So it was, you know, it was a pretty cool experience. So, but, you know, the king salmon, like I said, it's kind of a battle of attrition. You know, they might make a run when you first hook them, but then it's just kind of, you know, wear them out. And, you know, she fought and landed 4 of them that day, and it was probably one of the last fish or the second to last fish. Actually, she's, you know, kind of tired, and she asked the guide, she's like, Adam, can you, like, start the motor up and, you know, get me closer to the fish? And he just laughed. He's like, nope, I'm not.
Yeah, you've had it easy enough today.
So, yep, he made her earn it.
Yeah, well, it's
exactly. So the fishing, the fishing for, you know, sport fishing out there is, you know, incredible. So I talked about the big rainbow trout, talked about the, you know, 5 different species of salmon, and you got other species you can chase as well. I mean, some places out there have got northern pike, and, you know, usually people are like, yeah, northern pike. Some guys just want to do it for a day. You know, that's available in some places. But some that are more popular and kind of unique. I mean, grayling, call it the sailfish of the north. It's not a real big fish. In Alaska they get kind of big. Few four. I think one of the like the world record size grayling came out of the Bristol Bay region in Alaska. I caught some pretty decent ones, 2-3 pounders. Those are pretty decent fish, and they're really cool. They've got this huge dorsal fin. That's what, like I said, they call them the sailfish of the north. But other fish they got lake trout in some places. They have got gulp and Arctic char, which are very, very, very similar. Don't ask me to give you the exact difference between the two, but they're super cool looking fish. In fact, the Bristol Bay rainbow trout, when they get colored up, get really bright pink sides and the olive green backs, and they have got so many spots on them. They refer to them as leopard rainbows, and it's a really stunningly beautiful variety of rainbow trout. And people think, gosh, that's great. It is a really beautiful fish. But if you find a picture of a fall season, like spawning couple with the char or Dolly Varden, that fish, I think, is more stunningly. They've got these tall backs, and they've got this bright pumpkin orange belly, and the fins, they're pectoral. They've just got like this blinding white leading edge on the fins. They're super cool looking. I like, that's like one of my bucket lists that I want to have a picture taken holding that thing someday. And while I've been to Alaska a bunch of times, and I've been there a time or two during the right time to get a fish like that, it has eluded me. So
yeah,
that's still on my list that I need to get that thing.
Wow, I think that's just incredible abundance of resources, like most things in Alaska, and all those fish sound awesome. I mean, I'm down here just trying to chase white bass and black bass and, I guess, largemouth bass, whatever you want to call them, and crappie. But to think about trying to chase fish like that, I mean, that's the one thing I really wish that I could do up there is fish. I mean, obviously going big game hunting would be awesome, but
we haven't even touched on that. And I
exactly.
was just sitting here thinking, hey, we still have to mention some of the stuff that you can go hunting for, because it's also an amazing place for remote wilderness style hunt.
Sure.
And seriously, the fishing's amazing. Hunting is not many people, I would say, do the hunting versus the fishing out there, because thousands and thousands of people go fishing out there. Not that many go hunting, because you're chasing things that have some fairly limited numbers available. Brown bear is a big thing. The Southwest some of the highest brown bear anywhere in the world. So when you think of the National Geographic style pictures and videos of the bears standing at the waterfalls as the salmon are jumping up the waterfalls as they're moving upstream to go and spawn, the salmon have to navigate those waterfalls. Well, the bears know exactly where the salmon are going to be coming, and they know where they're vulnerable. So the bears post up at those waterfalls. That is taken in the Bristol Bay region of Alaska.
Wow.
So Brooks Falls, a place called Brooks Camp in Katmai National Park and Preserve. That's probably one of the more famous bear viewing locations in the world, as well as a place called McNeil River Sanctuary. And McNeil River is a limited entry, got to get super lucky and drawn by permit, drawn in a lottery for a permit, I should say, to visit there. That's one where I did get very lucky. I haven't won the big lottery where I win millions of dollars and retire early, but I won the lottery to go to McNeil River, and that was pretty darn cool.
Yeah, that's the better one to win.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I remember sitting there, watching at one time in our field of view. I think the count was 36, 37 brown bears in our field of view. In the river, we were on this little gravel pad, right above the bank of the waterfalls, and we had, I believe, 8 people in our group, and at a place that's managed. This is managed by the state of Alaska. McNeil River is. You camp there, and you go each morning, same time, same trail that you take to go viewing at the falls. It's a very regimented and very everything's like clockwork, and they've never had an incident with hurting people hurting bears, and it's just an incredible experience. But like I said, you're sitting there, and we were watching over 3 dozen bears in a field of view at one time. Everything from sows with cubs to big boars, and they're fighting over best fishing spots, and
Wow.
little ones who are a couple years old, probably their first year away from their mom, just kind of like learning to get along on their own. And they would catch a salmon and go scurrying up the riverbank and try and hide and eat their fish before one of the big ones would come steal it from them. It was fascinating to watch the interaction. So yeah, McNeil River is an amazing place. Again, out there in southwest Alaska. It's actually right on Cook Inlet, on the west side of Cook Inlet. But so brown bear hunting is a big thing out there. You're getting bears that square 10 feet, and moose is another real big. Brown bear, you're required to have an Alaska professional guide to take you, unless you have close relation who lives and is a resident of Alaska. But moose hunting, it's another opportunity out there. You're getting moose, 60, sometimes 70-inch spread on their rack. You can't imagine that there's an ungulate that's that big, but the Alaska Yukon moose is the biggest of the moose. So those are out there. Caribou, population of caribou is down right now. Those herds do fluctuate, and the population of caribou in southwest Alaska is down. Late season fishing, you can go and catch those huge rainbow trout that we talked about before, and they're packing on the feed bags to overwinter, and you can do some awesome fishing in the fall, and then follow it up with go duck hunting in the morning, go fishing, and then go and do some hiking and go around the tundra and shoot ptarmigan. So,
Yeah.
There's some cool cast and blast opportunities in the fall too. So.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm as a kind of a probably I'd consider myself a second-year duck hunter. I have quickly become very attached to waterfowling as kind of one of my very favorite things to do, and the thought of being able to get my hands on a harlequin duck would be really cool.
Yep. So, we're kind of like that's setting the stage for what Bristol is about. I talked about the salmon fishery, and 62.3 million was the year. And that salmon fishery has been in existence for over 130 years now, and it's managed so incredibly well by the state of Alaska that abundance hasn't been depleted like many places where they get overfished and then it's done, and now what do you do?
Yeah.
They have managed the Bristol Bay fishery, and Alaska's fisheries, pretty much in general. They're having some many places in the state with king salmon returns of what's going on. But in Bristol Bay, the returns are still just off the charts. And the way they manage is they pretty much have a target number for each of the main river systems out in Bristol Bay. They have a target number for what they call escapement. And what they do is, they've got all the commercial fishing fleet ready to go, and they let a wave of fish go through past the commercial fishermen and into the rivers. And after a while, they've got sonar on some of the rivers, and they actually have people on some of the smaller rivers standing on the bank with like a clicker, 5, 10, 30, estimating as best they can the number of fish that are passing them. And they've got like a sheet of white plastic across the bottom so they can see, the fish coming by. But then there's sonar readers on some of the rivers too. So when they get to like a certain number, they'll say, the fish biologist to manage the fishery will say, okay, we're well on our way to, to trying to hit that escapement figure that we have as their target to make sure that, enough of them get upstream to spawn, reproduce, and continue the cycle of salmon in Bristol Bay. And at that point, they will say, okay, commercial fishing fleet, we're going to open up your season for, 8, 10, 12, whatever, and let them harvest a whole bunch of fish. And they'll shut them down again, and more fish go through. And that's the system that they use to ensure that the rivers remain, home to healthy populations of these salmon species. And it's worked well enough that, like I said, 130 plus years into the commercial fishing industry in Bristol Bay, and well, they just had their biggest year ever for return. So
Wow.
They manage it incredibly well. That fishery that's managed so well is managed so well that it supports an industry that is worth $1.5 billion every single year, and there are over 14,000 people employed in that fishery.
Wow.
So it's not only biologically productive, it's also economically super productive.
Sure.
I mean, it's its own little, it's an industry in Bristol Bay. So, those over 50% of the sockeye salmon that you find consumed around the world comes from Bristol Bay.
That was my next question what are the odds that I here in Texas have eaten a piece of salmon from Bristol Bay?
Well,
pretty good.
I know that both Whole Foods and HEB, they wild Bristol Bay salmon. That is to say that the salmon that they have from Alaska seafood section is sourced from Bristol Bay.
So the odds are pretty good then.
Yep, and when you go to restaurants, if it I always make a point to try and ask if they can tell you where the salmon came from. So that's like I said, over 50% of the salmon, wild sockeye salmon consumed in the world come from Bristol Bay. It's a huge industry. And you mentioned earlier when you introduced me that I work on a project called Businesses for Bristol Bay. And yeah, I was just telling you that this industry, it's $1 billion every year, employs 14,000 people. And truthfully, people all over the United States, whether it's from the grocery store, or whether it's from a seafood restaurant nearby, they have the opportunity to enjoy some amazingly good food, not just good tasting, but good for you. So that salmon from Bristol Bay puts jobs all across the country, whether it's fishing guides, companies that make rods and reels, companies that do travel for places like that, guides from all across the country go up and work at time, all that stuff. But then you got the seafood industry as well. So that's why, Whole Foods is supporting efforts. Publix, huge supermarket chain in the Southeast. They're a Fortune 100 company. They're on board with Businesses for Bristol Bay. And then of course, like I said, pretty much all the hunting and fishing, all the fishing brands, and many of the hunting brands that you have in your gear closet are part of this effort. So,
yeah.
So the economy that Bristol Bay drives is super, super important, and that's why Businesses for Bristol Bay was created. So it's just, like I said, I try to paint a picture of what the area is like,
Sure.
what lives out there, what goes on out there for fishing and hunting. And, I talked about a little bit about the fishing that I've been fortunate enough to do. And my wife came along, we did that flyout trip, all sorts of cool opportunities. Again, I'll go back to that whole arm and a leg and your firstborn child to go to Alaska.
Sure.
People think the same thing about Southwest Alaska. I mean, certainly you're not going to drive out there. You got to take another flight. You have either Dillingham or King Salmon, which are kind of the two larger spots where Alaska Airlines flies into. And then from there, you're going to do one of, I would say, three or we can break it into four sort of options to do a trip in Bristol Bay. Start at the high end. If you want to go to a lodge, that's fine. I mean, some of them are boats on their home waters and other things nearby. Some of them offer that along with float planes to fly out to more remote rivers. So that's at the upper end of things. There's also, what I would consider, like the fixed tented camp, which the accommodations are a step down from lodges, and you're like in these, what they call weather port tents, comfy, got wooden floors with carpet on them, you got beds in there, you got a heater in there, you have a, big communal, usual dining room and stuff like that. So it's less expensive, but sort of, I would say, kind of like the sweet spot, middle of the road. They've got, decent boats that'll take you around on the waters nearby. And then, the other option, which I kind of like break into, subgroups, would be a float trip. And that would depend on your level of experience and expertise and how comfortable you would be, going off on a float trip in a raft, old Alaska wilderness. You can do it guided or unguided. So,
and I'll tell you what, that's what sounds good to me. Put me in a float. Put me on a float with somebody who can take me around, and let's camp out, and let's. I mean, I can't even imagine what the stars must look like in Alaska at night when they look as awesome as they do in a place like Colorado, right? Where you still have a lot of people. I mean,
yep.
I am
not a lot of light pollution out in Bristol Bay.
No, I'm looking at a quick fact from Google Maps as I'm kind of looking at kind of some of the places you're talking about. It says as of the 2010 census, the borough population was 997 in Bristol Bay. So 997 people. That's incredible. There are more people that live in the neighborhood that I live in than that. That's incredible.
Yep. So the float trip thing, and the different levels of trips that I just laid out there, I've done each of them, and they're all awesome.
Sure.
The first time I went out there, I did a float trip, and it was with a group of friends, and I'm not skilled at all in running a raft, but it was awesome because several of the people on the trip, A, were skilled, and B, really wanted to be on the oars. So I had no problem saying, okay, that's fine.
Here you go. I'll
you
cook, you row.
Yeah, exactly. That allows me to have a fishing rod in my hand the whole time.
Absolutely.
So, no, that was a bunch of fun. But you are traveling through bear country. I said,
sure.
It's like some of the highest concentrations of brown bears in the world. So we had the electric fence, battery powered electric fence that we would set around our camp every night, and you could hear bears shuffling in the after dark hours. Although in the summertime it doesn't really get super dark, but it was a unique experience. We had great fishing. We had sort of weather some days, but it was a great trip with friends. Saw a lot of cool stuff, and I've done the sort of like the middle of the road tented camp thing, and that's a blast too. And then I've done the lodge thing where you do some fly out trips. And I remember I was on a trip where I was fishing with a friend actually from Dallas, and he was at the time one of the board members. I think might have been a VP for Dallas Safari Club at the time. He came up on a trip with me, and we went and floated with a guide. Actually, it happened to be the same guide who helped my wife catch all those big king salmon that I talked about earlier. Adam was our raft guide this particular day, and we went to a place called Moraine Creek. It's pretty popular. People who've been out to Bristol Bay have probably gone to Moraine Creek, and we had an unbelievable blue sky day, sunny, and the fishing was incredible, and we saw so many bears. And I've got pictures. We're floating in this river in this blue raft, and we are floating by bears who are standing in the river. I've got a picture of two bears standing practically shoulder to shoulder. They both got their noses down at the water. I mean, they're just like waiting for salmon to come past them. And I don't know, we probably were within 12, 15 of those bears when we went past them. I mean, those are, by the end of the season when they're packing on all their weight to go hibernate, I mean, those bears are pushing 1,000 pounds.
Oh my God.
And, you float past it, it's like, oh, that's a really big bear.
That's a big.
But, they're just doing their thing. They're interested in the salmon.
Yeah.
And it was an amazing day, and we got to the end of it, and I just sat back and I said, I don't even know what happened today. Either this was like an incredible day of fishing with world-class bear viewing thrown in as a bonus, or we just went on a great bear viewing trip and happened to catch an awful lot of fish.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just one of those days that you'll never forget. So I also won't forget it because it's the one time I've ever been sprayed inadvertently by bear spray.
Oh.
It went off by accident inside the raft, and the guide said, he goes, "Nobody breathe," and by that point it was
too late.
I had already gotten a little bit of it, and it wasn't fun, and I'm in no hurry to do that again. But
oh, I can't even imagine. Just like just jump in that water and get your face wet and get it off of me. It's like it's oily too, right? So it's really kind of is it?
Yeah.
Not easy to get off either.
No, I'll tell you that you bring up a good point, because the funny thing is we were floating down the river, and we had snacks in the raft, and we had beverages along. Always good to have a cold beer at the end of your day.
Absolutely.
Fishing. And we're going along, and honestly, we had the beers in basically a landing net hanging over the side of the boat, and keeping them cold that way in the water. And they must have got, a bit of that spray, because we were passing out the beers at the end of the day. A couple other guys were on a different little nearby river, and we met up at the float plane at the end of the day and said, "Hey, you guys got any beers left?" And we handed one to him, and the guy cracked it, puts it up to his mouth, and he's like, "Oh, it's kind of burned." Seriously, I mean, that thing had been in the water for a long time. It still had some of that stuff on it.
Ugh. That's incredible.
But yeah,
beers.
But
bear spray beers. Maybe a cool new can a brewery idea.
There you go. Well, I don't know. Aren't all the brewery names and ideas practically taken pretty soon?
You would think so. There's a billion gajillion of them, So I'm always amazed by the new ones that are coming out. But they seem to be cranking out good beer. So call it whatever you want, as long as you're turning out good beer. That's fine with me,
Yep. Well, this was. I'm going to tell you, this was just a flat out Pabst Blue Ribbon is what that thing was.
PBR is where it's at, man. Right. That's
it's funny. It's come back into vogue. I remember when I was a kid working for my uncle's contracting business to put myself through college. Every Friday, Uncle Lauren would get done early and be like, "Hey, I'm going to meet you guys at the shop." So his partner and myself and my little brother, who was working also at the time, we'd clean up the job site. And by the time we got back to the shop, Uncle Lauren had, a 24-pack case of PBR in the shop fridge. So
ready to go.
Yep, days of my youth.
PBR, man, it's where it's at. So we've talked a lot about, kind of just what it is and how beautiful it is, and to be honest, what's at risk here, right? I mean, all of those things we've talked about are at risk. Yep. So what is, for somebody who may go, I have no idea what the Pebble Mine is, what would be your response to them?
Okay, my response would be, now everything that we talked about, what it represents and how valuable it is, all this stuff is put at risk by a proposal by a tiny little operation out of Canada who is trying to get permits to build what would be the biggest open pit copper, gold, and molybdenum mine in North America, one of the biggest metallic mines in the world. And it is absolutely staggering, in scale what they're proposing out there. You're talking, it's a very large deposit. There's no disputing that. However, one of the problems is it's super low grade. So you're talking about excavating tons and tons and tons of earth to get ounces of the valuable metals. And the problem that creates then is what do you do with all of the mine waste, which is high in sulfide content, which results in creating what's called acid mine drainage. It's basically, sulfuric acid that all this waste has to get stored from now till the sun burns out, and done so safely. And it's never been able to be done anywhere else in the world successfully without messing up water. And that includes mines like this in the desert. And you look outside Salt Lake City, Utah, and there's a place called the Bingham Canyon Mine. If you fly into Salt Lake, you'll see it. And that thing is big, not as big as Pebble would be, but that thing is big, and it has created problems with the water in the Salt Lake area that they have got basically the biggest water treatment plant in the country to make sure that people in Salt Lake area can consume water. So it's something so big that you can't even comprehend. Miles across, the infrastructure that would be required to make this thing come to fruition is amazing in its own right. You're talking 180 miles of a natural gas pipeline from the Kenai Peninsula under Cook Inlet, a new port on the west side of Cook Inlet, an overland pipeline and road system to the south shore of Lake Iliamna, which is the biggest freshwater lake in Alaska. You're talking an 18-mile water crossing of Lake Iliamna. You're going to have to build that pipeline for that natural gas underneath Lake Iliamna, and basically mountain ranges underneath Lake Iliamna. So you're building a pipeline across a mountain range, and by the way, doing it underwater. You'd have to have a barge system going for an 18-mile crossing of the lake, and that leads around, and ice-breaking barges. Then on the north side of the lake, you'd have the final end of the road system, which would run out to the mine site, where they're going to build a 270 megawatt power plant to run this whole operation. So the infrastructure attendant to the actual big mine itself, the infrastructure is amazingly, disruptive. And some of that corridor, the port on the west side of Cook Inlet that I mentioned, I talked earlier about me getting lucky and winning the lottery to go visit McNeil River. This would be pretty much directly adjacent to the McNeil River State Game Sanctuary, where some of the best viewing for brown bears in the world takes place. So, there's all that infrastructure is a big thing, but then the mine is an open pit, potentially in the future an underground part of a mine. It is just something that would change the character of Southwest Alaska forever. And most people would think not in such a good way. So the problem with the mine, you've got stream crossings, you've got dewatering of the wetlands out there. You've got, streams are going to be losing, rivers and streams are going to be losing water. It's something that is pretty, terrifying to think something on that scale could take place in a place that's as valuable as Bristol Bay. Alaska's got a long history of resource development. You go back to, when the Russians were there. What are they doing? It's the fur trade.
Sure.
So you got that. You've got primarily in southeast Alaska. We talked about, that part of the state earlier. You've got oil and gas, certainly. You've got, mines of various types in different parts of the state. But Alaska, has never looked at something on the scale of Pebble in a place like Bristol Bay. Alaskans love their salmon. And Alaskans also are generally supportive of resource development. Pebble has done something that really hasn't been done before. Well, it's done a few things. It has gotten a higher level of opposition within the state when you poll people on whether they think Pebble is a good idea or not. the majority of Alaskans continue to say, no, this is not a good idea, which that doesn't happen. And it also, when I talked about those, the native people, the commercial fishery, and then the sport fishing industry, those three user groups in the past have always been adverse, fighting over allocation of that enormous, albeit it's an enormous resource that, millions and millions and millions of salmon and everything they support. They've been, at odds over allocation of that resource. Well, the Pebble threat came along, and they realized, holy smokes, this is a big enough threat to all of our futures that unless we work together to fight for the fish, we might not have fish to fight over in the future.
There's no reason to fight ourselves if the greater threat is looking out, going to kill us all, right?
Yeah. Yep. So they found ways to set aside past disagreements over allocation issues, primarily what they would fight over.
So
and they're all working together, and that's an unprecedented.
Yeah. So with what seems to be such a unified front of people, and like you said, an overwhelming majority. Let me stop with my question, and I want to ask another question.
Sure.
Who out here besides the mining company themselves? Is there? I've not in all that I'm looking for. You do a Google search. Typically, you do a Google search of something that says kind of controversial and is something like this that we're talking about today, the Pebble Mine.
Yep.
Most of the time when I'm on Google, I'm finding, hey, here's the good reasons we should do it. Here's why we should mine in Pebble, mixed with some pretty healthy amounts of, or 50-50, let's say, of, hey, no, we're not going to do it, and here's why we're not going to do it. I don't see any of that. I don't see any, hey, we got to do this, right? This seems to be very much a very small group of people who want to do this versus a very large group of people who are like, no, across multiple industries,
right.
who are pro energy, who are pro, kind of development and things like that. How does this thing even still have any legs underneath it?
That's a good question. I mentioned earlier that the company behind this is a small outfit out of Canada, and in fact, the only asset that they really have is their claim at the Pebble site. Years they have had, I've worked on this issue for 12 years maybe now, so it's been around a while.
Yeah, no,
and we were fairly close in 2014 to having some protections placed on the Bristol Bay area, and I can go through a little bit of that little timeline in a moment. But the folks behind this, the small company out of Canada, they're trying to go it alone at this point. They have over the years lost 4 major financial partners over the years. Mitsubishi backed out of the project. A company called Anglo American, which is one of the bigger mining companies in the world. They were involved in the proposed development at Pebble, and they walked away. They had an option to exercise a clause in their contract to either continue or get out, and they walked away to the tune of $500 million. They probably had sunk into the project by that point, and they just walked away from it. Another huge mining company in the world is Rio Tinto, and Rio Tinto at one point held I think it was like a 19% stake. Northern Dynasty, which is the name of the company from Canada who's behind this, and Rio Tinto, they actually just walked away as well, and they donated their stake in the company to a few nonprofit organizations in the state of Alaska. And most recently, a company called First Quantum Minerals, who has some big mines in other parts of the world, was sniffing around and potentially looking to enter into some sort of partnership agreement with an option to, get further involved with the Pebble project, and they elected to not go through on it. So, Northern Dynasty is a company that, they're sitting, I think, or these days they're less than, I'm sure it's less than 60 cents a share for their share price. And back in 2011, it peaked at around $21 a share. So that, I don't know. I mean, they're trying to make this happen. They continually have to, issue more warrants for more shares and dilute the current shareholders. And it's an interesting game they're trying to play because they're trying to keep things permitted, which would, make it more likely that some other company would take an interest in it and come in and, partner with them, or probably if I'm the guys at Northern Dynasty, they just would love to have somebody take it off their hands.
Sell it, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it's hard to imagine, why it's going the way it's going, because they sat around for a long time and kept saying, well, next year we're going to apply for permits, and next year we're going to apply for permits, and they never did. And this is where I'll kind of touch on the timeline that I mentioned a few minutes ago. So, in 2014, the federal government, through the Environmental Protection Agency, had, after a multi-year study that was done to look at the resources of Bristol Bay and look at the threats from something like Pebble, and it was peer-reviewed twice by a panel of independent outside experts in various persuasions. The EPA put forward the Water Act, a set of proposed restrictions telling anyone, Pebble included, that if you wish to build a mine out in Bristol Bay, here are some things that you ought to know going into it. If your project is going to result in this many miles of river and streams that support salmon, it's going to impact, that, you're going to have a problem. If you're going to exceed the impact and the destruction of this many acres of wetlands, you're going to have a problem. And if you're going to impact stream flow by a certain percentage, that would also cause a problem in, you getting a permit under the Clean Water Act. And they put those forward. Those restrictions, they had precedent used in other places before. That's part of the Clean Water Act that doesn't get used very frequently, maybe about a dozen times since the Clean Water Act became law in the 1970s. So it's something that EPA doesn't just wave around and slap it on projects all over the place. It's something that they hold for very unique circumstances, and this indeed is certainly a very unique circumstance. So they put those proposed restrictions forward, and the folks on the other side, the Pebble folks, obviously were none too pleased with it, and they sued the EPA in a number of ways. They also, tried to sue some of the entities who are, opposing the development of the mine. And most of those lawsuits were either dismissed or won. And there was one that hung out there long enough that, Pebble's whole thing at that point was just to sort of, buy some time and run out the clock on President Obama's administration. So when the election came in November of 2016, this was just kind of in limbo. EPA had these proposed restrictions that were put out there, but they couldn't finish the job of protecting Bristol Bay as long as the lawsuit was hanging out there. And the election in November of 2016, Trump certainly changed the dynamic in this issue, and there was new leadership brought in to the EPA, as well as obviously all the other federal agencies. And suddenly, after all the Pebble saying next year, I'm going to apply for permits, well, they looked at it and they kind of probably
now's the time to strike.
This is about, the stars are aligned about as well as we could probably hope for them, so we better get going. And by May of 2017, the one outstanding lawsuit between Pebble and the EPA had been settled, which Pebble kind of used that as their impetus to, boom, let's get going on this. And by late December of 2017, they actually submitted an application to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, who is in charge of issuing a permit that would allow for, the disposal of mine waste out in Bristol Bay, or in any place that proposed or that application is applied for. But in this case, we're talking Bristol Bay. So the Army Corps received a permit application from Pebble, but what Pebble did was they decided, this huge mine plan that we've been about doesn't seem to be very popular. So they're being quite disingenuous in applying for a tiny fraction of the whole deposit, saying that they're going to, do this project. It'll have about a 20-year lifespan, and that's what we're applying for. So that's what you should judge us on. However, what they're doing at the same time, because they need money, like I mentioned earlier, they are out there on the global mining circuit, and they're touting this as the biggest untapped deposits of copper and gold in the world, and this is a generational project. And they're saying, they're talking out of both sides of their mouth.
Sure, yeah.
They're saying, we're just applying for this, what I call an entry-level mine, and they're out there on the global mining circuit trying to get money to build eventually an enormous mine in Bristol Bay. So you can't have it both ways.
No.
So Army Corps is reviewing this application, and the crazy thing is, it's hard to understand. I don't think anybody's come up with a very good reason for this. Army Corps is doing this at a pace that is rather unprecedented. They are attempting to get this done, which generally, probably for a project of this size and type, based on other things around the country and other mines in Alaska, certainly smaller than Pebble, because Pebble would be much larger than any other mine in Alaska. This normally takes, let's just say 4, 5, 6. In this case, Army is trying to get it done in around 2.
Wow.
They're moving this thing at an unprecedented, and I think most people who care about Bristol Bay, would consider that a reckless pace. Alaska's U.S. senators have expressed concern over the pace that this thing is moving along, but to date, the Army Corps has not really backed off. They haven't taken their foot off again, and all the entities and all the user groups that we talked about in Bristol Bay, the Alaskan natives from the region, the commercial fishing interests, the sport fishing world, they've all been telling Army Corps, hey, pump the brakes here. You got to slow down because there's so much at risk. You got to do this right. And been rather unresponsive. Let's just say that. But the fact of the matter is, we really can't figure out what's the big rush here. It's not certainly being done formal process timeline. I think it is fair to postulate that it is being done more with a political timeline in mind. If you figure out when they think they could get to the point where they would issue this critical permit that they're reviewing the application for right now, they're talking in the first half of 2020, and that would just happen to be before the next presidential election. Again, they looked at it and they thought, it's probably the best political, setup for us that we might get. So let's take our shot now.
Let me ask you a question about the Army Corps of Engineers. So I understand, obviously, Northern Dynasties, let's put the pedal to the metal here, right? We got to get while the getting's good, because who knows what's going to happen in 2020. But why is the Army Corps of Engineers moving so fast? I can't imagine. I don't see the benefit for them. Is it money for them that they would get from the company? What's their skin in the game here to move so quickly?
That's what we're trying to figure out.
That's the $10 million question here, right?
Yeah, that's what we're trying to figure out, and I think I think there may come a time when they'll be asked to answer that question by members. Congress has oversight. Let's just say Congress has oversight authority over different parts of the federal government, and there might be a day when they're asked to answer that question, and we'll see what kind of an answer we get from them. But
I plead the
Pebble,
fifth.
yeah, exactly. So Pebble, as you said, they're obviously trying to get while the getting is good. There's some pretty crazy stuff involved here. The guy who is one of the top executives at the company, Northern, his name's Tom Collier. He, in his contract, has got a $12.5 million, it is classified as extraordinary bonus that is available to him if Pebble hits this permitting timeline. So he's obviously got,
12 million reasons.
a load of incentive to get this thing permitted as rapidly as possible. And it's crazy amount of money that these guys are spending on DC lobbyists. Over the years, they always had a presence spending money in DC on lobbyists. But in 2017 and 2018, it went from, maybe around $1 million, maybe less than $1 million a year on lobbying. They're ramping it up. The last couple of years, they probably spent $4.5 million on lobbyists in Washington D.C. to try and get this thing done. So they're not messing around. We just have to keep our resolve, hold the line on these guys, because they're in it to make a quick buck compared to an industry for the commercial fishing that's been around 130 years. The fishery for the native people has been around, as I said, for generations and generations, centuries. And, the sport fishing and hunting world, views this as one of the finest places in the planet to do some remote fishing and hunting. Well, and all of that, that fishery's worth $1.5 billion every year. That's something that can continue, and they've proven that they can manage that fishery well enough that can continue as long as you don't mess it up. And this has proven to be a pretty real way to mess up clean water in other places. So.
Hell, even if they weren't doing the mine, right? They were just doing all the other things that took the infrastructure to get the mine there, right? Don't even think about the mine. Just the infrastructure alone would be somewhat devastating, to that region. And I think this is the thing, right? What we talked about at the very beginning of this podcast, the fact that it is so remote, that it is a distant place, right? If you were going to build this in the middle of downtown LA, it wouldn't even be a question, right? You weren't there. This is the thing, right? It's out of sight, out of mind. It's just like other public land issues. It just is nobody. It doesn't. Is it going to affect my drinking water? No. Well, then do it, right? Is it going to affect what I need to do in my life? No. Well, then do it, right? So I think that's the attitude a lot of people have, and like I said, to me, it's just still fascinating that we have this organization, this government entity that is moving this fast for no reason. And to me, there's always a reason. And that reason's got to be some sort of an incentive under the table to get this thing done.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to imagine.
That's my opinion, by the way.
I tell you what, you were on Instagram or Twitter and happened to follow the president's elder son, go through his feed, and you will find pictures of Trump Jr. out in Alaska. Here he is with his son Donnie the Third, and they're holding a bright red, spawning color sockeye salmon. That's out in Bristol Bay.
Yeah.
Can't tell me why on earth are we thinking of doing this?
Yeah. I'm all about development. I'm all about energy, but for God's sakes, there's got to be some balance. There has to be some balance in what we do and how we do it. And there needs to be. We don't necessarily need to go scar every single aspect of our continent and our world to get every single little piece of resource we can get. Right?
Yeah, right. I said earlier, Alaska generally is favorable opinion toward resource development. The state has depended upon resource development of various types for pretty much its entire existence. The sentiment in Alaska over this project is different than anything else. And in fact, the late Senator Ted Stevens, a guy who really never met a project that he didn't like, he actually came out and declared that he was not in support of Pebble. It's the wrong mine in the wrong place. And that's the way people look at it. This is not something against mining. This is something about an area that's not just, it's not just a pretty place. It's
Yeah.
not just something that you want to protect because of the fish and the bears. It is something that is economically incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
And why are you going to put, that sort of, an economic impact, $1.5 billion a year, 14,000 people employed by that fishery. Why are you going to put that at risk for something is going to maybe employ a couple thousand people during construction, less than 1,000 during its operational phase, and, run by some small foreign company out of Canada? If they got their permits, who's going to buy it? What if the Chinese came in and
Correct.
became a partner in the project? Are they going to care about America's salmon fishery? Probably not.
Oh, hell no.
Yeah, and then when it's all said and done someday, and I'm thinking, if it were to happen, which we're not going to let it happen, right? So, but if for some reason it ever did, then you're dealing with a project that, if they built it out to its full capacity, which is what they're always touting when they're trying to raise money, you're looking at 11 billion tons of mine waste that's going to have to get stored from now till the sun burns out. And nobody can make a promise that that's going to get done safely. I mean, one of our very strong allies up in the region there in Bristol Bay, he's been quoted as saying, this kind of stuff, he goes, I almost wish it was nuclear waste because at least that has a half-life. This stuff is around forever.
Yeah, it's not going to go away. I mean, it's a great point. Like you said, it's just, this has been the very hard thing for me to get my head wrapped around is that there is such a strong opposition to this, and in just all, like you said, all walks of life. I mean, when you have a governor of the state who's in the state where this is going to be built, who's saying no, I mean, that just doesn't occur very often, right? I mean, I have not seen that in very many situations, especially on something with an energy or a resource type extraction situation. Therefore, that 99% of the time.
Yeah. So I will, to what you just said there. The prior governor of Alaska, before the elections this past fall, the prior governor was opposed to this. The current governor, I think it's safe to say he is much more amenable toward a project like Pebble. So, there's work being done certainly to try and get him to see the light. Let's just say.
Yeah.
But he is certainly not the friend of Bristol Bay that the prior governor was.
I mean, I'll tell you, just sitting here, scanning through a document that I think a lot of people should, and I'm going to throw this in the show notes, but, just a quick Google to kind of get ready for our podcast tonight and really kind of familiarize myself with more and more things, it has led me to the project environmental impact study or statement on the Army Corps of Engineers page. This has got a wealth of information on what this is, and I mean, it just is crazy when you look at the map. When you went over the earlier, just kind of this whole, hey, we've got this, compressor and this, all of this kind of all of these infrastructure type stuff. It doesn't. I mean, I think when you visually see the size and scope of what we're talking about here, it is mind blowing of what they want to do for something like this. And the amount of land that's going to be touched in trying to accomplish this.
No, I mean, and as I said, what they've actually applied for, and that EIS that you mentioned that you're going to put the link in the show notes. Just keep in mind that is a small fraction of the Pebble deposit. So the stuff that we've talked about, that's just what's in their plan, and the plan is just the first bite at the apple.
Sure.
I mean, this is pretty much the camel's nose under the tent, and they're going to go for it. If they got the first one, they figure it's going to be a lot easier to expand in the future. So
100%.
you take what they're looking at right now, which would be all that infrastructure. You can't tell me you need a 270 megawatt power plant to just build a smaller project. They're setting it up for the future. And that's what all this infrastructure does, is it makes it much more likely that region gets developed more in the future. But even, the scaled back version of Pebble that they have on the drawing board right now, I mean, even that, you're talking about losing 81 miles of streams. you're talking about 3,600 acres of wetlands being lost, and then you're talking, just all that infrastructure. So the impacts from this scaled back version of Pebble are enormous, but then you think about what if they built Pebble out to its full extent, that's much, much, much bigger than what we're talking about right now. And here's the real crazy part. In Southwest Alaska, Pebble, if it came to be, Pebble would probably be what would be considered to be kind of like the center, or the impetus to develop a mining district. Because here's a real scary thing: there are about 800 square miles of mining claims that are already staked out there, and they're just lying in wait. And nobody is moving on them until the first one would happen to get through and the infrastructure gets in place.
Yeah.
Then all of that becomes much more viable. So you're not talking about, just Pebble. You're talking about ending what Southwest Alaska is famous for, and it would go from being one of the finest wilderness hunting and fishing destinations in the world, undoubtedly the biggest and most productive wild salmon fishery in the world, $1.5 billion industry that supports 14,000 jobs. You're talking about trading that for what would turn into a pretty much industrial mining district.
Yeah,
I don't think it'd be too much fun hunting bears and catching salmon in a place like that.
No, I mean, and that's the thing, right? I mean, like I said before, I absolutely am fine with development, right? As human beings, we've got to do it, but I mean, at some point, there's got to be some balance. Exactly, there's got to be a balance here, and I mean, I really and truly hope that 10 years of work and this thing keeps, like I said, if we can really rally around this. And I think that a lot of people can. And I mean, for instance, I just saw, it's funny you start to see these things, but the Pebble Mine sticker, the Pebble Mine with the white background, red thing through it. I'm watching a YouTube video today, and lo and behold, the dude's got a Pebble Mine hat on, right? He's got that logo on there. So, I mean, this has made itself into quite the lexicon of things. And I mean, at EarthX this weekend, which was a big, huge Earth event, environmental friendly, right? So we were in the wheelhouse there, but every single person we walked past, a lot of people who knew what it was. There were a bunch of people who didn't, and we have. Obviously through Scott's organization, through the organization that we are very much entangled with backcountry hunters and anglers, we had a way for people to sign up and put in a petition basically to say, hey, this can't go through. I mean, the amount of people who stopped what they were doing with kids running around, who in no way, shape, or form would ever even set foot probably north of Texas, right? Who stopped, who pulled out their phone, and went onto the website and signed up right then and there to say, no, this is not good. This cannot go through, in a far better, a far worse explanation of what you can do and what you've done as far as explaining this to people. This cannot go through, right? I just can't imagine this thing is going to move forward. And
well, we've been fighting it a long time, and I think you tally up the number of different opportunities that people have had the years to, weigh in with their official comments, which is what you're kind of talking about.
Sure.
What's going on right now. And I think we'll probably close with what can people do. But over the years when we've had these official comment periods, we're upwards of at least 1.5 million people cumulatively have come out and said, no, this is just not a good idea. It's the wrong mind in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Instead of, it's not, this is not an appropriate place for a project of this type. And, that's, we're probably easily, when you tally up all the numbers, and like I said, we're probably like over 1.5 million. And I bet you the other side, if you do percentages, I know they're not touching 10%, on support on their side of the question. So it's just crazy. So many people, I like to say, why is it so many people have to work so hard for so long and so many people take action so many times for something that seems so completely obvious.
Yeah.
It's a crazy world. I mean, I think a lot of people, especially in the fishing world, consider this probably the biggest freshwater fisheries conservation battle of our lifetime. And I like to do the kind of work that I do. You have to be an optimist. I think it's kind of in the job description.
Absolutely.
But I like to look at this and say, you know what? If a project like Pebble can happen in a place like Bristol Bay, then I don't know. I mean, where the question maybe is, where do you draw the line? After that, the question I think would be, is there a line anymore?
There's no shutting the door, that's for sure. I mean,
yeah,
it's just
there's got to be places that that you can develop and develop with less risk than
exactly
than what's being proposed in Bristol Bay. And here's the other thing, that those minerals aren't going anywhere.
No.
Who knows? Maybe a couple centuries from now, there's a super incredible, new way to get minerals out of the ground that isn't going to mess up.
Correct.
Or doesn't have a track record of messing up clean water resources. So, there's other places that you can go for these things in the meantime that aren't Bristol Bay.
Exactly. And that's the thing, right? I feel like if somebody came to us and said, "Hey, we've been drilling for or mining something for this exact thing out of places, and here we have a 10-year track record. We have and there's just the technology that we have developed allows for this extraction to be clean. It allows for it to get our resources out to be very as destructive." Of the environment as you can be, then I would be fine. Okay, maybe, but I mean, with what, like you said, with what they do now, the way that things are done today, it's not right. This cannot happen and will not happen.
I like to think that humans as a species are intelligent, and as we evolve, we get more intelligent, and they'll be smart in the future, and figure out how to do something like that, like what we were just saying. But one thing that I'm pretty sure of is that we'll never be able to get greed out of our DNA.
No.
And as long as there's an opening for someone to try and develop something like Pebble, we have to keep defending it.
Absolutely. So, as far as helping out, right? So, what are some of those ways that somebody can help out? And let's talk about the time frame that they have to help out.
Yeah. Yep. No problem. So the Army Corps of Engineers, on this sort of fast track process that they're moving, they have got a public comment period ongoing on Pebble's draft environmental impact statement, and people can take action pretty easily between now and May 30th, which is the date that Army Corps has set for the close of the comment period. There are some requests from many different entities to extend that comment period, but as of today, Army Corps has not decided that they would grant any extension. Different groups have asked for that. Alaska's Senator Lisa Murkowski, senator from the state of Alaska in the U.S. Senate, she made a formal request just last week to extend it, but so far Army Corps has not said. So we have to go on the assumption that the comment period will close on the 30th of May, and it's very easy. You're going to have the link for the Army Corps' EIS.
Correct.
People can certainly comment through. I think they can comment through that portal. The Army Corps maybe not so easy to get comments.
Public comments.
And so the easiest way is simply to go to a website called SaveBristolBay.org. And from there, you will have a click on a take action, and boom, you can go straight to a portal that will allow you to submit a comment that will be delivered to the Army Corps of Engineers on the Pebble application. So that's probably the easiest way to do it. So again, from now until the 30th of May, we've got lots of partner organizations who have been, part of this fight, everything from Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, Partnership, all sorts of brands, Trout Unlimited, Fly Fishers International, just all sorts of hunting and fishing groups have been involved in this fight for a long time. Loads of brands from the fishing and hunting world are supportive, and they've helped spread the word over the years, and have done a good job of using their social media channels to get people to click through to go to that, say, bristolbay.org website to take action on it. So, we've got some awesome partners who have been, really, really supportive over a long time. I always need to let people know that this is a huge fight, and it wouldn't be possible without, folks from across the country taking it time and time again, and the many number of groups and organizations and brands who have been part of the team and continue to be part of a very important team. So it's something that folks can do very easily by just hitting that website, say bristolbay.org.
So say somebody is, super passionate about this. How could they help kind of at that next level? Is there a place they could donate money? Is there a place they could donate time?
Sure.
Where?
For somebody who wants to, go a step beyond, let's just say, donations. There is a really awesome and super efficient. I mean, you're not gonna believe this. There's a site called Bristol Bay Defense Fund, and this one is .com. And donations to the Bristol Bay Defense Fund will be used to fund a variety of activities that are, meant to help keep Bristol Bay protected. And it'll be, trying to get Army Corps to, as I said before, like pump the brakes and make sure that they're, doing, make sure that they have all the relevant information before they, processing Pebble's permit. So the Bristol Bay Defense Fund works with a variety of different entities who are working on this campaign and strategy. And the amazing thing is, it only has a 1% overhead charged to it. So wow. 99% of the dollars that donated get to the fight. So that's where I would encourage people to go if they were interested in a donation. And every dollar matters. So whatever the size, we will graciously and appreciatively accept any and all donations to that. And the other thing, if folks were, interested, we can always use help. If somebody wanted to, write a letter to the editor, get it in their local paper to, tell even more people about Bristol Bay and Pebble Mine. That's one thing that I would encourage. We can help with talk points, things like that. And then, also, if you, were interested in, sending a letter to your member of the U.S. House of Representatives, the state Senate, we can obviously also help you with that as well, because there are ways that Congress can be involved in this situation as well. And, they always like to hear from their constituents. So if you want to do something like that, I would just encourage, why don't you just, if you want, you can have people reach out, either to you, and you can pass it along
Sure.
to me, maybe is the easiest.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, if somebody's diehard interested in this, by all means, please utilize Stormwater Creek. We'll absolutely help take those things from people and get them into the hands of Scott and his organization, so that a difference can be made. But I mean, this is obviously something that is near and dear to our hearts. Like I said, I've never even been to Alaska. Have no idea when I'll go to Alaska. But I mean, this is something that anyone who fishes anywhere, anyone who recreates in the outdoors, obviously this is something that is got to get stopped.
Yep. It's a biggie. It's been out there a long time, and like I said, I think most people view it as for sure the freshwater fisheries conservation battle of our lifetime. And when you consider that that salmon are anadromous and spend time in the freshwater and the saltwater, then you're kind of talking maybe it's the saltwater.
Right.
The saltwater battle too.
Exactly. I just I can't thank you enough for coming on here and talking to myself and all of our listeners about this. I think it is a great thing. Is there a way I had forgotten the question I was going to ask. I remembered it now, but as far as staying apprised of things that are going to happen, where are a couple, what are a couple good websites? What are some good social media outlets to follow? Obviously, backcountry hunters and anglers, but what are some more direct
Yeah.
routes to get some
Yep.
breaking news, as you would say?
Yep. No problem. Yeah. You mentioned BHA. Fantastic partner, organization member. On the team. BHA though is involved in lots of issues in lots of states.
Correct.
Pebble is one that they're engaged in, but they've got lots of other things in the fire too. So if somebody wanted to, kind of follow and stay abreast of what's going on with Bristol Bay and the Pebble mine site, I would just say going and taking action on that savebristolbay.org. That'll get you into a situation where you'll get updates occasionally on that. You can also go there, check for latest news. I would go to Facebook and also look for Save Bristol Bay on Facebook. The other project I mentioned earlier called Businesses for Bristol Bay, it's more something that it's a way for our brand partners, whether it be Hy-Vee food stores, the biggest grocery store chain in the Midwest, or Scott Fly Rods, or Sitka Gear, or all of these, are all members of the Bristol Businesses for Bristol Bay team. That's where we use that portal to keep our businesses engaged in various ways. And a lot of times, we'll have them invite them to push stuff out through their channels to their much larger list of eyeballs. They got a lot of folks following them on Facebook, Instagram, and stuff like that. So I would say probably savebristolbay.org. B for BB, so Businesses for Bristol Bay is just a very short and sweet, like B4BB.org. That's another one you might want to check out. And then on Facebook, I would just look for Save Bristol Bay. It's probably the most reliably consistent as far as pushing out updates on things.
Well, awesome. I mean, like I said, this has been a great conversation. I can't thank you enough for joining us, taking your time to talk about it, and obviously, if as things change and evolve, we'd love to kind of have you on more and more as new things come out, and as there's new fights to be fought on the Bristol Bay and Pebble mine front. I'm gonna ask one more question of you, because I know a lot of people are gonna ask this. Why is it called Pebble Mine?
Okay.
You're like, oh, great.
That's funny because I have over the years been asked a number of times, why do they want to mine pebbles?
Yeah, exactly. What's so
what's
bad about picking rocks up?
Yeah, what's the harm in that? So I don't know for certain, but a story that I have heard about how it is called that was that a geologist who was flying to the site of the deposit was flying over these, sort of like low rolling hills, and I have heard it. I can't say that this is the truth or not. I've heard it said that the person said, "Oh, this reminds me of the Pebble Beach golf course in California," and I don't know. My other thought is, calling it something like Pebble makes it seem kind of small.
Yeah.
When in reality, it's anything but.
Yeah.
So it might be just a sneaky little thing that, Pebble Mine, that sounds like a small, harmless little thing.
You got to think there was probably a large amount of money that was paid to some sort of research marketing firm to figure out what to name it, you know?
Yeah, exactly. You know, what didn't come out on top was the biggest, most dangerous mine, the biggest salmon fishery left in the world. That was a loser.
Yeah,
candidate.
that one's still on the old cutting room floor.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, to wrap things up from my end, I just want to say, thanks for having me on the show. It was great to meet you at the event in Plano, and glad that we were able to follow up with this conversation. I also wanted to say, you know, I hope that folks learned a little bit about Pebble Mine. I also hope that they, you know, learned a little bit about Alaska in general. And I hope that anybody out there who has, and this is something that I hear more often than almost anything when I'm talking to people about Alaska, I hear a lot, someday I'm going to go to Alaska. And my pat answer is, make sure someday happens.
Yeah.
Because it's everything that you imagine and then some.
Yeah, I mean, great advice, because you know, I've got to talk the wife into going now. We're going to do this.
You only live once.
You will only live once. That's true. So, well, Scott, thank you very much. It was a pleasure talking to you, and you know, make sure you guys go out and check some of these information sources that Scott has talked about. There's going to be a bunch of that stuff in the show notes. You'll find a bunch of it on our Instagram pages, our website. We're gonna put a link up on the website as well. So, you know, if you're just like, I can't remember all that, just go to stormwatercreek.com. There'll be tons of links there on this stuff, as well as just kind of stay tuned for more information, because as things come out, we definitely want to have Scott back on the podcast to talk about new things that are occurring with this whole thing, as things probably are going to start shaking up here in the next, you know, 12 to 16 months, I'd say, right?
Oh yeah, I would be glad to come back on when the time is right for an update.
Absolutely.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Thanks, guys, for listening. And make sure you give the podcast a review. Please subscribe if you're not a subscriber, to make sure you're getting all the new episodes that come out. And thank you guys for listening. Have a great day.